Did you know that 50% of employment in India are generated in Middle India, what we know as Tier 2, Tier 3 towns like Ludhiana, Indore, and Bhopal? Did you know that Middle India accounts for 50% of India's startups? Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I'm your host, Anil Padmanabhan. The best kept secret about India is the ongoing transformation of Middle India. By this, I'm referring to cities like Bhopal, Jaipur, Ludhiana, Kanpur, Lucknow, and so on. Like I explained in the introduction, they have emerged as an important constituent of India's evolving economic story. In fact, a recent survey conducted by Primus Partners found that Middle India is emerging as a startup hub. Implicitly, this is also signaling a democratization of growth in India. To understand the what and why of this trend, I spoke to Charu Malhotra. She is the co-founder and managing director at Primus Partners. I began by asking Charu as to why startups were leaving the comfort of metros and moving into Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns.
So I think it's a mix of two factors. One is, of course, the pull of small cities or hometowns, as we may call it. And the other is, of course, the push factor, pushing them away from the cities. So let me just talk about what is pulling, startups or enabling startups to come from tier 2 and 3 cities. Because so these small towns from where they hail, they're a powerhouse of talent, opportunity, innovation. And it's a good thing because, this whole decentralization that we see is actually helping in decongest big cities and metros. But what are the main 4 5 main reasons why we see this whole emergence of startups from tier 2 and 3 cities? One is, of course, the cost advantages, because you have lower real estate and operational costs in smaller towns, and that makes them attractive for bootstrap startups. So if you compare, for example, let's say in the NCR itself, one is Noida, tier 2 city, and then Delhi. I mean, we see today Noida emerging as one of the tier 2 cities which are actually competing at edge with Hyderabad and Chennai. And you see startups like Paytm and PhysicsWallah coming from these cities. The other is, of course, this whole talent pool. There's an improved education system. There is digital fluency that we see, not just concentrated in the big cities and metros, but actually spreading across. And so that is another reason. And the other is, given the kind of solutions we find that the startups are, coming out with, or their business ideas, there is a rising middle class. And this rising middle class has very unique needs. And therefore, it becomes an underserved market. And we find the startup ideas and the growth stories are actually gaining a strong foothold because they are catering to those demands, specific demands. And of course, that whole thing about digitalization, you have high-speed internet connectivity everywhere, digital payment and e-governance. And we find 50% of online shoppers are actually coming from these cities, which has also led to the growth of e-commerce. And we find the startups, especially in the tech space, are able to respond to the growing needs and unmet needs from these cities. And the other is, of course, the SCZs, which have, because of the space and the real estate and the cost of real estate, low cost of real estate, people taking advantage of the SCZs and the industrial hubs and clusters. The other is what I mentioned was a push away from the big cities to it's saturated. Big cities are saturated. There's high competition. There's high cost of living and, cost of doing business. Also, there is a whole perception today I find when I travel and I speak with people in the, tier 2 towns and cities, They feel that the clean air, because there's the pollution. People want a healthy lifestyle today. They want to live healthy, and they want to move away from polluted environments of big cities. Also, that whole perception of safety, and crime. So some of them are perceptions, some of them are a preference for a particular lifestyle, which is also pushing startups from the big cities towards the small towns.
It's fascinating. Charu, what you're saying is the death of distance has come about thanks to digital connectivity. Second, you're saying that because of saturation, these tier 2, tier 3 towns have become alternatives to them. But what I was very curious about is you said that there's also a demand they are generating. So in some sense, they are also self-sufficient in demand and supply. Is that the right interpretation?
Yes, totally, totally.
So where is this demand? I mean, that means there is a certain income level to back it up, right? I mean, so are you seeing in your study, did you see that kind of income level in tier 2, tier 3 towns?
So yes, so for example, when we did our report, of course, so let me just come back to the numbers in terms of how many startups there are. There are around 1.12 lakh startups, which are recognized by DPIIT, and around 50% of these are situated in the tier two and tier three towns and cities. Um, and for example, what I said was that when they're catering to demand, so of course there is affordability, of course. There is affordability, but there is also price sensitivity. And startups, because they are not competing with the big brands and they are actually responding to the local needs. You have these, in fact, uh, physics. Okay, let me take some names, right? So, Roadbez of Patna, Dehat again from Patna, Shop Kirana from Indore, Razor Pay from Jaipur, Physics Wala from Noida. They have managed to, address that whole price sensitivity because they understand their market, because they come from those markets. It's a very contextualized business demand that they have also helped generate.
I just want to pick up from where you left off. If you said that there are an interesting class of entrepreneurs there, in Middle India. So is you alluded to the fact that they understand the magnitude and complexity of large scale challenges around everyday services like education, jobs, etc. Is that why they are successful and also at a better advantage than startups located in metros?
Oh, totally. So because they come from those areas, they understand local needs and they're able to come up with innovative solutions. It's like you are surrounded by a problem, you understand the nuances, and therefore you're able to respond to that. And also because many of these, for example, who are these startups, and where do they come from? So if you look at it, these startups, many of them so let's say 65 from our study, when we conducted a study of 146 startups in 23 cities in 5 states, we found that around 65% of them had studied in colleges in tier 2 and 3 cities, and 14% and 20% had studied in tier 1 cities, and 14% were, let's say, from institutions such as IIT, IIM. But a large mass of these startups have grown up, have gone to college, have done their higher education in those cities, and they understand. So, for example, when we see the kind of sectors or the startups, their business ideas. So let's take, for example, agri-tech and rural innovation. So I'm just going to take a Smart Beach. Smart Beach is one startup which is working in the agri sector, working for small and marginalized farmers in hydroponics, and they focus on nano farms and precision farming to help these farmers. Now that is a requirement which came from the context in which they emerged. The other is logistics and mobility, So the whole rise of e-commerce, the need of efficient logistics, hyper-local delivery gave birth to these startups in the smaller cities. EdTech, skill tech. Again, I mentioned Physics Wala, of course, An Academy, Upgrad, etc., which again mushroomed in Noida and Chandigarh, etc. Again, they're responding to local requirements. Same for health and medtech and fintech, financial inclusion. I'll also with e-commerce growing, I'm going to name, for example, Frontier Markets. Frontier Markets is an assisted e-commerce platform which supplies to rural households, something which your larger e-commerce platforms may not do it, within, let's say, 24 hours of doorstep delivery to villages. But this particular startup also works with rural women entrepreneurs and creates these Saheli networks. So it provides it actually creates employment. It is responding to a local need of actually supplying products in a price sensitive point. So they have studied that market, they have understood that data, and that data has been fed to them by the local, representatives, community informers like the Sahelis. So if you actually go in and study the nature, the personality of these startups, the kind of their genesis, how did they even come about, what are the kind of markets that they are, servicing, we find it's very democratic in that sense.
So, Charu, from what you have been telling us so far, it's very clear that in these tier 2, tier 3 towns, a large part of the opportunity lies in the very challenges that exist there. The friction of daily living, logistic challenges, or education. So, these startups are actually solving for those challenges in a way, making taking advantage of what is a negative in the region, right?
Right. But yes. So it's actually it cuts both ways. Today you find digital payments, penetrating even the to the village level, into the rural India, and so the rise of digital payments has also empowered a wider population to participate in the digital economy, and this has also created a large potential, customer base for startups. So both in terms of they, using digital payments and using digital platforms to service their business ideas, as well as being able to reach out, and you have a larger, more empowered populace to be able to draw your customer base from. But again, in terms of they understand the pain points of the people, for example, the unique challenges that they may face, and there is a direct exposure as opposed to those not coming from those contexts and are struggling to come up with a business, a proposal, a business, a hypothesis in which to set up a business. These people come from that particular geography, they understand, they also have a unique insight into what is their need, and so they develop solutions which are also tailored to the local environment. There's also could be a case that they are tapping that untapped market potential, because there are large underserved population that lacks access to essential services. But of course, with online shopping, that has of course reduced the whole, it has bridged this particular gap. But still, in terms of being able to capitalize on the potential that these untapped markets offer, they are able to provide affordable solutions which are specifically designed. It's like a first mover advantage in these geographies. And of course, then when you compare the cost advantages that they have to, more expensive cities from where to do business, this also gives them the added advantage of scalability and replicability. So if, you call it middle India, if you're addressing the large scale challenges faced by this particular portion of the population, they're also able to package it and to be able to provide this to other geographies than the original geography. And we have a lot of examples of these startups that may have sprung up in Indore but have spread out, may have sprung up in Bihar but have spread out.
Interesting. So it's basically they're also tapping into latent demand, not just in their location, but looking at geographies beyond them. Just curious, Charu, what is the how does this stack up in terms of gender? Are women also taking to these startups? Are their presence increasing?
So I think when we come to gender, when we come to women, um, there I find the challenges common to both urban and I mean to the metro cities as well as into tier and two three cities. But there the challenge seems to get amplified. Of course, it is there. Socio-cultural barriers. Which are more enhanced in tier two and three cities where there is a mindset, women's mobility. So women may prefer to do jobs depending on the availability rather than actually setting out to be an entrepreneur and going around, sourcing, credit, etc. But as a woman entrepreneur friend of mine interestingly comments, and she comments that women have a uncomfortable relationship with money, and she draws this comment from her experience of arranging finance for women for affordable housing, and women and money don't make for and this is again a generalization. I shouldn't get judged on that comment, but by and large, I find this true myself as well. Uh, so they lack credit history. They also lack access to collateral and then support systems, and they have very limited exposure to which of course is true for all startups, but more for women. The networking opportunities, which is important for startups, which are more probably in metros and big towns, big cities than tier two and tier three cities.
So, Charu, is all of this entrepreneur push in tier two, tier three towns reimagining the challenges around jobs, income, and cash flow? The last is a big problem in most of middle India.
Yes, yes, definitely. The although I will so okay, so there is a lot of in fact our startups, the number of startups in our country today, and our whole startup ecosystem, we are the third largest globally. This has also created a lot of trust, faith, and a sense of enablement, a sense of confidence that yes, if I as a startup man or woman from a tier two and three town, I do want to set up my own startup or get into it. There is a lot more confidence. Although the other side is also true, you find 70% of startups folding up, and even those that persist, we hear stories of layoffs, and cash flow issues, and so they're like any other business. But today there is more belief, there is more faith in the sustainability of these startups.
So, finally, Charu, what I want to ask you is that in all this conversation that we had, it really looks like tier two, tier three towns are evolving in a manner which we never imagined. So, can we then conclude that this is leading to the democratization of founders, ideas, and capital in India?
Yes, we can. In fact, more so today than earlier. However, we need to actually solve for some, the funding issues. So while we hear success stories, but we do not hear the tales, fraught with struggles. We, from our survey. So of course, the message definitely is it is getting democratized, because around there is 60% of penetration of digital infrastructure across the country, across districts, and the large number of startups that we find, 50% belong to tier two and three cities, again across all districts, and towns such as definitely point to the fact that it is getting democratized, it is getting more broad based, and across several sectors, also non-tech startups, which is again a very interesting a narrative emerging. But the Issue being again that 40% of startups that we surveyed found funding gap as a hurdle. You know, so while 77% were self-funded, you know, only 3.5% actually took funding from reputable funding agencies. So that big, huge gap, where we, and of course, very small percent again, while, many found inspiration from friends and family, only 3% had the funding of friends and family. So this is, a funding, a more equitable funding ecosystem, needs to be there.
In the final analysis, it is clear that the path to India's economic future is through Middle India, a segment that is often ignored. But as Charu pointed out, that the entrepreneurial spirit in Middle India is very much alive and kicking, yet it faces handicaps, especially with access to credit. The thing is that the just concluded general election signaled that Middle India is unhappy with the incumbent government. Presumably, a chastened government will acknowledge this response. But for that, first, this government has to listen to Middle India. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to StratNews Global on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please to share your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.